listening to Driving Law, a podcast by Kyla about all things related to the rules of the road.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Driving Law. I am Kyla at Acumen Law, and with me, my co-host, Paul Doroshenko.
And here we are
in the
car. And this was something we've done before.
Yep.
I don't think you and I have done a video one in the car, have we?
Yeah. Oh, no, we didn't. We didn't, because I think I was feeling ugly that day.
But I did one with Allison and Alice.
Yes.
And so we wanted to, it's Driving Law podcast, do it in the car every once in a while.
We should do it while driving.
We have recorded it not as a video while driving in the past, and the sound quality was awful.
Yes.
So we won't be doing that again. But you have court, and I agreed to drive you to court.
Yes.
So you could do other things on the way.
Yes.
And also record the podcast. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Feels like it's been a very long week.
Yes.
Because it was the first full week after the holidays. It just hurts.
Yeah, my kids get a professional development day on Monday. I think it's a relief for them after that week coming back. It was hard.
That's ridiculous.
It was difficult for them.
Anyway, big news.
Yeah, huge news. What is your TikTok up to now?
Oh, probably 500,000 views.
So Supreme Court of Canada.
Yeah, 499,000.
Supreme Court of Canada rendered their decision on the leave application on the charter challenge to mandatory ASD, approved screening device breathalyzer demands. So all approved screening device demands are mandatory. You have to do them. But the law changed in 2018 to make it so the police did not have to have a reason to make the demand, essentially.
Yeah.
And the argument was that when there's no reason, it's unreasonable. And this is without some grounds to suspect that something was wrong.
Warrantless search.
A warrantless search.
And no opportunity to consult with a lawyer before determining whether to comply.
In circumstances where your right to counsel is suspended, we thought was wouldn't necessarily be charter compliant. And of course, it isn't charter compliant. It's only saved by Section 1. Section 1 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms says, essentially, if it is demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society, then you can infringe charter rights, but it's supposed to be minimally intrusive and try and minimize the infringement as much as possible. And it's a balancing.
Yeah. So they say, oh, well, there's use immunity attached to it. It can't be used as evidence in a criminal proceeding. Of course, it's used as evidence in administrative proceedings and for collateral consequences like your insurance and things like that. And they also say that it is justifiable because it's done immediately, except for all the times that it's not done immediately.
Well, and there's no remedy available as a charter remedy generally in the administrative context when that's where we see it's often not done pursuant to the rules that are set out in the criminal code for it.
Yeah.
So that was our concern about it. And the other concern is essentially what are now referred to in the U.S. as Kavanaugh stops, where people are targeted on the basis of reasons that are not legitimate, that are essentially, bigoted, discriminatory. We see it because we see it so often, where ASD investigations, roadside breath tester investigations, are essentially a method of stopping somebody they want to stop for some other purpose, and then an opportunity to just have them there detained and investigate them and give them punishment there at the roadside that people can't really attack the police methods.
Yeah.
So young brown men get pulled over in British Columbia, and sometimes the police suspect them of something else, and they will end up being subject to an ASD demand. And the police officer might know darn well, because there's no odor of liquor or anything like that, that they're going to pass the demand, but they make it somewhat optional. They suggest to the individual that you have a choice. you have a choice here. And you don't have a choice. You have to provide a sample. But then if the guy gets upset and says, well, then I refuse. I'll hire a lawyer. You have no remedy basically because because there's not charter remedies in the traditional way.
Well, at least in the US, there has to be some basis for a Kavanaugh stop, whereas in Canada, there doesn't need to be any basis for the stop. They just need to be checking to make sure you have a driver's license.
Yep. Yep. But, we call them sort of de facto prejudice stops because the easiest way to clarify or classify it that people will understand is on the basis of your skin color. In the States, you're allowed to stop people on the basis of their skin color in a Kavanaugh stop. You're not allowed to do that in Canada. But if there's no remedy, as there is not in many circumstances, like in 90-day immediate roadside prohibitions, then it might as well just be the same.
Yeah. So depressing. That is pretty much the end of the road. I thought, well, maybe there's another way to formulate the constitutional argument, but really it does come down to Section 1. Like you establish whatever breach. It's still the rationale under Section 1 is going to be the same unless there's a way to demonstrate that the Section 1 rationales aren't what's actually happening on the ground. But then you would need a large body of evidence of police conduct across the country that would be, very difficult, if not impossible, to gather.
Evidence that the government controls.
Yeah.
And that we don't have. And you presented to Parliament, I guess to the Senate, you certainly presented to the Senate, and they agreed that it was unconstitutional and shouldn't stand. And they removed it from that piece of legislation on the basis of your testimony. And then Parliament put it back in. And so we thought, we've got a fairly good argument here. But ever since the pandemic, it's been my view that our argument was essentially like the rationale behind it was so badly weakened because in the pandemic, before that, police officers would have to form a reasonable suspicion that you had alcohol in the body. And all of these senior police officers would always tell me they never had a problem with that. They could stick their face in your car. They could talk to you for a minute. They would form the suspicion. And they never had a circumstance where somebody went tooling down the road after being stopped. And then we're in an accident and we're tested and found out to be over 80. Like it just doesn't happen. When there's no odor of liquor on the breath, it's, the people are for their perspective, they would be detected if they had an odor of liquor on their breath.
Yeah.
But then when the pandemic came, you had all these officers who quite rightly would not want to stick their face into somebody's car, stick their face into somebody to try and breathe their inhale their breath that they had exhaled. And so I thought, oh, this is the end of our charter challenge here. Now the court's going to side for the government. And I don't know that was a consideration anymore, but it certainly made it, I think, in all of those challenges across the country. And it was in most provinces, I guess, it was argued.
Well, it also got people, I think, psychologically used to the idea of giving up some of your liberties for the greater good, or public safety, right? The pandemic, there were restrictions on, places you could go. You had to provide vaccination status to go certain places, jobs.
I disagree with that because if anything, it created a schism. Like there's a huge.
Yeah, but the schism is not people on the bench, the ones making the decision.
Well, I mean, there are judges who probably have very civil libertarian views and don't want to be told what to do. It's just like police officers. There's many police officers who are fairly extreme in that. But,
You forget the BC Provincial Court announcing 100% vaccination rate for all judges.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And I guess the other thing I would say is that courts have to endorse the court process. Judges have to back up the judicial process. The rest of us may be suspicious, but from the perspective of us being lawyers, we have an obligation to endorse the process. Years ago, I was in a situation where I considered calling the police. I had a civil situation and I had a police situation, and I didn't call the police. Because I looked at it and I spoke to a police officer and the police officer told me, the police are not going to do anything for you here. And I look back and it was an error on my behalf because me as a lawyer, I have to trust the process, even if it doesn't work out correctly in the end. You have to trust the process, and that, I think, is where we're stuck with the courts, unless there's some other way of approaching it. And the federal government adopted this practice on the recommendation of the courts to make a statement at the beginning of new legislation to explain how charter compliance has been considered. And I think that essentially neuters the court a lot. I don't, you're making the funny face if you think that all of these new provisions that I'm going to tell you what you're thinking. These new provisions that are for mandatory minimums are going to be struck down with charter challenges. And that may be, but I think that declaration at the beginning of how charter compliance is being met by the legislation and the charter considerations are going to be seriously considered by the courts in the future when it comes to these challenges.
But the court always considers, the parliamentary discussions that take place. So I don't think a charter statement changes the landscape. And even if Parliament considers the charter, just because they thought about it doesn't mean they thought about it right. So I don't think it neuters the court. We've had lots of legislation that's been found unconstitutional that came out with charter statements attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a presumption, though, of charter compliance.
Oh, yes.
You've got to establish that it's not. And the court's practice of looking at hypotheticals is a useful thing. But, I mean, unfortunately, we've got all the hypotheticals in the world we could run with this, and it didn't succeed. At hypotheticals that are already established. They're not even weird hypotheticals. They're hypotheticals that the court has recognized in the past of targeting people, of racist police enforcement, and you and I have seen all the time in the mandatory demand provisions being deployed where a police officer has created a whole new test for the demand. So it's not that the person had an odor of liquor on their breath. That would be a suspicion one. It is the person spoke in halted English and they were 2 kilometers from a pub, driving the direction from that pub. And, and then you get the video and you discover that the person is Farsi speaker, as a native language speaker or something like that. And that's the reason that they made the demand in the end. So there's lots of examples for us, but it didn't help.
No. We should move on from.
Sorry, that was my monologue.
Yeah, it was so.
You talk about read it.
I haven't got a word in edge.
You did the TikTok that got 496,000 views so far. I haven't had a chance to speak about it yet.
You don't have your own TikTok account?
I do. I just haven't recorded a TikTok.
Oh, so it's inaction, not prevention.
Well, you've got me here, so now you get to hear my. Maybe we'll get 400,000 views of our podcast this week.
I'm sure we will. Let's move from the federal government to a municipal government.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, you can lay this one out.
Well, there's two, so I don't know which one you're talking about.
No, I think the cameras is the issue.
Yeah, so City Councillor Linda Annis, who's also running for the mayor of Surrey,
has a special designation this week for us.
Yes.
We'll get to.
We'll get to. She is proposing or trying to advocate for removing any restrictions on police accessing real-time footage from intersection and speed on green red light cameras.
Yes, so cameras that are out there to issue traffic tickets to registered owners of vehicles would then be surveillance cameras used by the Surrey police.
Yeah, mass surveillance devices.
As they want it.
They can get them right now. There's 2 ways they can get the footage right now.
The city has it.
The city has it, and they can actually, in emergent situations, they're allowed to make a request through e-com, and it only takes minutes to get the footage and to get access.
But they want more than that.
They want to just be able to do it when and where they want with no oversight, which is concerning. The other way they can get it is just get a warrant, get a search warrant.
Well, the way they'll spin it is they'll say, I mean, we have gangland shootings in Surrey. We have we have a protection racket going on, and they want to be able to identify those vehicles, and they need to be able to see it right now to be able to try and stop those people, to identify the vehicle and then stop those people.
Well, they said, if there's a
And that will be the
kidnapping,
rationale.
those minutes are important. How many kidnappings actually take place? I mean, come on.
I've been involved in representing one. My career in
In
26 years.
6 years of
It's
practice.
a long time ago. It was all over the news.
Yeah.
They're very rare, but that will be their rationale.
Oh, yeah.
And, we've seen the slippery slope of technology policing us over the last decade get so far on fast on the slippery slope. It's actually really starting to frighten me.
The slippery slope on your charter protected rights. It's like the mandatory breath testing thing is also part of the slippery slope, right? We become comfortable with the police being able to demand things from us without any grounds and without prior judicial authorization for a search. And now we're being like, oh, let's just allow the police mass surveillance tools. And I'm sure they'll only use it in the good circumstances and not for any other nefarious purpose or unjustifiable purpose.
But if you look at just the general idea, though, of giving up your privacy, any one of us who is on social media has given up their privacy. Any one of us, anybody who uses Google has given up their privacy. I know, but it's a mass choice. Like the society is demonstrating that this is something that we accept. So, I mean, I think it's terrifying. I read all of those dystopian novels when I was in university.
I'm choosing which governments to give up my privacy to. And if I want to give my privacy rights to the Chinese government through TikTok, I will.
Well,
I don't believe the Chinese government is monitoring people on TikTok, by the way.
I think the Chinese government or the CIA could get everything from Google right now, or could get everything from, our email providers or email servers, or, I watched this former CIA officer on TikTok laying out all the things that they can do. He says, they can get into your phone. They can turn your TV into a listening device in your house.
There's actually legislation that's been tabled in the federal government to allow police on demand to internet service providers and, internet companies to just hand over whatever they want.
So it's coming, and we're just giving up our privacy left, right, and center. First, we're voluntarily giving it up to be on social media, and then the federal government is looking at it, and the provincial government and the Surrey police force are looking at it and saying, well, people don't seem to give a damn about privacy anymore.
What about those rare circumstances in which somebody's
kidnapped?
We
need to be able to spot the Chevy Cavalier.
And it might take minutes for us to get the data otherwise.
And then we get videos of like 6 police officers just standing around.
Yeah, I know. Think how long it takes to get the police to deal with anything if you call them.
Well, there's 6 of them standing around.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's their proposal. It's dumb.
Well, it's dumb, but it's going to happen. If it doesn't happen now, it's going to happen later on. And as I say, it's just because we've become accustomed to giving up our rights and giving up our privacy. And as we look at the Computing Electronics Show, CES in Las Vegas this year, is all about AI robots and robots doing AI. And when I'm sure some of this AI could figure out how to access all of this information and put it all together, they're going to be able to pull together everything and about everything that every one of us does. So unless you choose not to have a cell phone, but you have no choice because you can't buy parking without a cell phone. You have to have an app for half the government services that are going to exist.
Yep.
I mean, it's just I'm getting scared. I'm actually freaked right out about it.
Don't think too hard about it, Paul.
Well,
the government's not really paying attention to you.
But it's not just the government, right? It could be a foreign government that decides that they're going to do things to target people.
Better delete TikTok.
Well, it's not just TikTok, though. You're already into it. My thought was, at my age, that it would never be something that I'd have to deal with in my lifetime. I thought it'd be my kids' lifetime. They would be the ones who have to deal with, the drones who are hovering above, monitoring you because you're already monitored and they already know where you are, and the killer drones. I said 10 years ago that we should be teaching kids how to destroy drones.
You're really dark today.
Well, I don't feel very positive about any of that, especially when I look at the videos from the Computer Electronics Show and that it's this year all about robots, and next year it's going to be also all about robots. And I just don't, it does not bode well. As I say, I read all of those dystopian novels.
So did I. It was mandatory reading in high school.
Yeah.
I just, we can't change it. We can't stop it. So you may as well just learn to roll with it and take what good you can from it.
Okay. So, yeah, I know. Well, what else am I going to do? I'm going to go live in the bush.
The only other thing you can do is use your privilege and power as a lawyer to fight the government when the government tries to engage in overreach. Even if you're not successful, at least you tried. That's all you can do. So that's where you need to focus your energy, not on worrying about robots with AI monitoring you in China or India.
As you know, I fight and fought the government, and I have suffered for it too. And this is something that you choose to do, and I will continue to do it courageously till the end. But I also have been singed enough that I'm not as courageous as I was when I was 35 or 40.
Okay. So you said that Linda Annis earns a special distinction this week. She is our ridiculous driver.
Texting to the chief of police.
Yeah. City councillor / mayoral candidate of the week.
Ridiculous driving law person of the week.
Yeah. And that's not just because of her ridiculous mass surveillance proposal. It's also because of what has been revealed about some behavior she was engaged in pertaining to police and roadblock locations.
So she has a house that apparently backs on or is right beside a golf course, $2.7 million home.
Must be
nice. And backs onto a very nice golf course, and is probably a member of that golf course. And so she apparently, this was discovered through FOI requests, was texting the chief of police in Surrey. Now, why do you text somebody? Usually because you think it's not going to be subject to an FOI request.
Because you're a millennial and it's rude to call?
Well, I mean, if you want something from the chief of police, normally you would put it on city letterhead. You would write a letter, and so it would be there available as a record.
Yeah.
But
you would also probably, have that as a decision at council that was made to specifically make that type of request.
Yes. So the request that she made through text messages to the police chief was to revisit the idea of roadblocks at this golf course. Now, when confronted about it, when this all came out, she said, no, I was just speaking generally of golf courses. That was her first one, but she lives on a golf course. And then the second response was, I was just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. This was my constituents asking for this. And there was a response from the chief of police that was like, we don't do enforcement there anymore. But then there was also a response when this became public from members of the impaired driving or the traffic police in the Surrey police saying, we're not changing anything on the basis of we go where where there's likely to be people who are driving away impaired.
You know where there's likely to be people who are driving away impaired, Paul?
Golf courses.
Golf courses.
Yes.
How many files do you and I read in the summer where the person's on the golf course having a beer every couple holes?
Yeah, and then they get to the end and they go into the club and they have another beer or two.
Lunch, yeah.
And then they've counted out the hours and they figure, well, I've been here for 6 hours and I've only had 8 beers. I should be fine.
And I ate.
Yeah. And then they end up driving out and getting an accident 4 kilometers away from the golf course, or they get pulled over.
Yeah.
Golf courses are a place where people drink, and so then the next spin was we need to revisit over service at the golf courses, which is not an issue for the chief of police. That's a provincial issue.
The liquor inspector.
So she's got a lot of spin on it. And the current mayor of the city of Surrey, and people, if you're not in BC, you probably don't know that Surrey is huge. It's a huge area and it's a gigantic population, and it's the fastest still growing city in BC, not properly covered in the news, but CBC and others are starting to do a better job with that.
Well, the whole Surrey municipal politics and the city of Surrey versus the Surrey police has been...
So the mayor has called for an investigation, and now the city councillor who sent the text messages says this is political because I'm running for mayor in the next election too. So she's trying to oust me.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's not that it's an improper use of your power and authority as a city councillor to influence policing decisions to benefit yourself personally and your friends in your neighborhood, who are your constituents, by the way.
well, and if it's not that, I mean, it is that from my perspective. I look at it, I see that it is just such bad judgment.
Sure. And
Um,
it perfectly warrants an investigation, and maybe she'll be cleared in the investigation. That's why we have investigations.
Yes, but it also is a very serious matter and could be characterized as a criminal offense, depending on what they come out from the investigation.
Like misfeasance in public office type situation.
There are all sorts of provisions in the criminal code related to using your office wrongly. And I don't know what it would be, so I'm not floating that out there. I'm just saying there will be an investigation, and I suspect that it will be, somewhat made public. But freedom of information requests are a very important thing in our society. Our provincial government made them costly, which has undermined the quality of our democracy. And once again, I would say call your member of the provincial government and tell them to eliminate that, because we figured out all the problems with approved screening devices years ago as a result of the fact that we were able to make freedom of information requests that we could afford to do to get that information. And this was, again, something discovered by a freedom of information request. And there's always somebody in government doing something they really, really shouldn't, and often to their own benefit, as this would suggest.
Yeah. So
So there's our ridiculous driver,
yeah.
ridiculous person of the week.
And there's our dark, gloomy, the future looks not so bright podcast.
Well, the plus side, spring is right around the corner.
Yeah, and with AI technology, we can get some really cool, glasses like in sci-fi movies.
Yeah, there was another topic we wanted to discuss, and that was the investigation of, or there was a news story just before Christmas. We'll have to get to that one next week about police staking out liquor stores, private liquor stores. And we wrote a blog post on it this week, so you can check that out on vancouvercriminallaw.com on our blog.
Yeah.
And aside from that,
That's our podcast. If you need to find us, you can find us online at vancouvercriminallaw.com or give us a call at 604-685-8889 and tune in next week for another exciting episode of Driving Law.